Nicolly Fernanda Pogere, was 15 years old. She was a schoolgirl from Mococa in the state of São Paulo, Brazil. School, family, and first emotion. Everything in her life was only beginning. Yet by behind the messages, romantic promises, and her visit to grandfather in Hortolandia, there was a carefully developed plan. She arrived during the school holidays, hoping to meet the boy she believed she loved. Several days later, she was found in a lagoon. Her body had been mutilated and partially dismembered, wrapped in household materials, weighed down with stones, and marked on the back with a strange inscription. This is not only a story about jealousy, but it's also about cold calculation, envy, manipulation, and an absolute disregard for human life. It is a story about minors capable of acts from which many adults would recoil, and about a legal system that, even when the full truth is known, may impose no more than 3 years of confinement in a juvenile institution. Despite her young age, people around Nicolly already admired her kindness, good manners, and inner warmth. She enjoyed studying, loved drawing, and could spend hours immersed in lines and images, as though she instinctively understood that creativity could express more than words. Her notebooks were filled with sketches, while her dreams were focused on aviation. Nicolly wanted to become a pilot. It was not merely a hobby or a passing fantasy. It was a genuine goal she hoped to pursue. Her family relationships were described as close and affectionate. Her mother, Priscilla Magrin, often said that she was proud of her daughter. On social media, she shared photographs of Nicolly and wrote about her with tenderness and love. The teenager was often seen with relatives, friends, and classmates. People described her as sociable, open, and sincere. During the school holidays, Nicolly decided to travel to her grandfather's home in Hortolandia. The city, roughly 200 kilometers from Mococa, offered her not only a change of surroundings and a chance to rest, but also the possibility of seeing someone who had become very important to her. Henrique, a 17-year-old boy from Hortolandia, was more than an old acquaintance. They had attended elementary school together when Nicolly's family lived in that city. Even after she moved to Mococa, they remained in contact. They exchanged online messages, and their friendship gradually developed into deeper feelings. About 1 month before the tragedy, Nicolly and Henrique began describing themselves as a couple. Their long-distance relationship developed without regular physical contact, but with a strong emotional connection. For Nicolly, it was her first serious love, and she treated it sincerely. Their conversations made her feel valued and gave her something special to anticipate. As an open-hearted teenager, she did not recognize warning signs. She had no idea that behind the romantic expectations were intentions far removed from honesty. Her trip to Hortolandia was not simply a family visit. Meeting Henrique seemed like a step toward adulthood and independence. She could not have imagined that her life would end among the familiar streets of the city where she had spent part of her childhood. Henrique left a mixed impression on the people around him. Relatives described him as quiet and reserved, but also withdrawn, distant from his family, and difficult to understand. He rarely participated in family gatherings, kept to himself, and, according to relatives, preferred isolation even during serious family problems. This behavior caused unease, but no one understood how serious the danger might be until it was too late. Henrique lived with his father in a house in Hortolandia. His mother was reportedly not actively involved in his daily life. At first glance, the house where the decisive events occurred looked no different from the others nearby. Behind that ordinary exterior, however, relatives later described disturbing behavior. They alleged that Henrique had once killed the family cat, recorded the act, and then buried the animal. According to the account in the source text, only a small circle knew about this episode, and it did not trigger a serious intervention, even though it appeared to reveal cruelty and a lack of empathy. Another important person in Henrique's life was Evelyn, a 14-year-old girl with whom he had maintained a long but highly unstable relationship. Their relationship had lasted for about 1 year and was marked by repeated arguments, jealous outbursts, separations, and reconciliations. Henrique's relatives alleged that Evelyn could behave aggressively. One of the most alarming incidents reportedly occurred when she climbed over the fence of Henrique's home while carrying a knife, forcing his father to intervene. Despite such episodes, the pair repeatedly resumed their relationship. Evelyn's behavior worried more than Henrique's family alone. On social media, Evelyn reportedly showed an interest in dark themes, shared content containing violent elements, used usernames with satanic references, and participated in online spaces associated with disturbing material. Some users later claimed that they had encountered her aggression online, including threats directed at girls who had contact with Henrique. The relationship between Henrique and Evelyn apparently continued, even after he began communicating romantically with Nicolly. In reality, his relationship with Nicolly may have been part of a manipulation intended to provoke jealousy in Evelyn. Nicolly did not know that Evelyn had remained in Henrique's life and continued to influence him. The situation between Henrique and Evelyn became increasingly toxic. Nicolly found herself caught between two teenagers whose relationship had gone far beyond ordinary adolescent conflict. Behind Henrique's quiet exterior was a pattern of emotional coldness and potentially dangerous behavior that would ultimately have tragic consequences. In messages to one of his friends, Henrique allegedly stated that he had started dating Nicolly only after seeing Evelyn with another boy at a party. He described Nicolly as a stranger and wrote that he felt disgust when he looked at her. In one message, he allegedly wrote, "I felt disgust when I looked at her." In another, he said that he wanted Evelyn back and added, "If she wants, I will kill the girl she does not like. I do not love her either." The reference was understood to be about Nicolly. These statements showed not only contempt for Nicolly's feelings, but also a level of emotional coldness that went far beyond a normal teenage breakup. The messages were allegedly written before Nicolly disappeared. They suggested that Henrique had never viewed her as someone with whom he genuinely wanted to build a relationship. Instead, he treated her as an instrument in a conflict with Evelyn. Knowing about Nicolly's feelings and her willingness to travel to see him, so he cynically used her trust. From Nicolly's perspective, however, the relationship appeared real. She believed that their feelings were mutual and that he took the relationship as seriously as she did. When Henrique suggested that they meet, she had no reason to suspect a trap. Nicolly could not imagine that she was only a temporary link in the unstable relationship between Henrique and his former girlfriend. Everything unfolded against the background of his efforts to win Evelyn back. He wanted her back at any cost, even if that meant removing someone whom they saw as an obstacle. Investigators later considered the possibility that Evelyn had demanded that Henrique get rid of Nicolly. The available correspondence and the teenager's behavior made such a scenario appear possible, although this allegation should be treated as part of the investigative theory rather than a final judicial finding. Nicolly's first visit to Henrique's house that weekend appears to have taken place on Saturday, July 12th. She stayed until Sunday. During that meeting, something happened that she had not expected. Henrique told her that he no longer wanted to continue the relationship. He offered no clear explanation and was categorical. For Nicolly, the rejection was devastating. Her feelings had been sincere, and the breakup came without warning. When she returned to her grandfather's home, she appeared sad, but did not explain everything that had happened. No one recognized a specific sign that she was in immediate danger, although her emotional state had clearly changed. Despite the breakup, she remained in contact with Henrique and still hoped that they might reconcile. That hope played a decisive role in what happened next. On Monday, July 14th, Henrique contacted Nicolly again and proposed another meeting. The excuse was that he wanted to explain himself or possibly restart the relationship. According to the investigative theory described in the source text, the invitation was actually a planned trap. Nicolly immediately told her grandfather that she wanted to visit Henrique again. Because she had already been to his home, no one objected, and her departure did not appear suspicious. She left during the afternoon, expecting to spend a short time there and return in the evening. This time, however, she never came back. Her family tried to reach her, but she did not answer. Concerns intensified the following day when repeated calls and messages went unanswered. Henrique's father was reportedly at home during part of the afternoon on the day of the final meeting, but said that he had not seen Nicolly. According to him, she may have arrived later after he had left for a night shift. When he returned the next morning, his son was not at home, and there was no obvious sign that a guest was still present. By then, Nicolly's family had begun taking steps to find her. Henrique's behavior immediately raised suspicion. When relatives contacted him, he claimed that he and Nicolly had broken up and that she had left his house. When asked for details, he reportedly answered evasively, avoided clear explanations, and showed little visible concern about her disappearance. His account did not seem credible. If Nicolly had truly left the house, where had she gone? Why had she not returned to her grandfather? Why had she not contacted anyone? Her relatives quickly realized that Henrique's story did not match her habits. None of her friends or family knew of any other plans. Everything indicated that she had gone to meet him and had not been seen afterward. The disappearance was sudden and unexplained. The one person who might have clarified what happened remained silent. Soon after the search began, Henrique also disappeared. He stopped answering most calls, failed to return home, and, on the rare occasions when he responded, claimed that he had fled because he was being threatened. To both his relatives and the police, his behavior looked like an attempt to escape. Nicolly's grandfather went to the police in Hortolandia and formally reported her disappearance. Her mother, Priscilla Magrin, began an active social media campaign, sharing photographs of Nicolly Fernanda Pogere and asking the public for help. Friends, neighbors, and acquaintances joined the search. News of her disappearance spread quickly, and people began sharing posts, searching for clues, and discussing possible explanations. Despite these efforts, no reliable information emerged during the following days. Henrique's beat father then reported troubling discoveries inside the house. He said that he had noticed dirt or mud marks, as if someone had entered wearing shoes after being outside in wet conditions. More alarming were stains that appeared to be blood in the living room, kitchen, and bathroom. At first, the father tried to understand what had happened without immediately contacting the police. His attempts to reach his son failed. Henrique either gave vague answers or ignored the calls completely. The father soon decided to contact law enforcement. Henrique's relatives understood that the situation had gone far beyond an ordinary teenage argument. They did not attempt to hide what had been found in the house. Instead, they asked for a forensic examination and openly stated that the traces might be connected to Nicolly. According to the narrative, they did not obstruct the investigation or try to justify the teenager. Henrique's father continued sending messages to his son, urging him to report to the police and explain everything. Most of the messages went unanswered. In one response, Henrique claimed that he was innocent and had nothing to do with Nicolly's disappearance. Meanwhile, the search continued, but Nicolly appeared nowhere. There was no activity on her bank card, no new social media activity that could be confidently attributed to her, and no genuine messages or calls. Everything suggested that something had happened shortly after she went to meet Henrique. At the same time, police began interviewing relatives and acquaintances of both Nicolly and Henrique. These conversations produced the first broader theory of motive. Investigators learned that the romantic relationship had begun only recently, had lasted about 1 month, and that Henrique had previously, and perhaps simultaneously, been involved with Evelyn. Police, therefore, suspected that he had maintained contact with 2 girls at the same time. The investigation moved quickly because every hour without new information increased fears of a tragic outcome. The absence of useful surveillance footage, eyewitness accounts, and clear telephone location data made the search more difficult. After several days, specialist teams joined the operation and investigators began following new tips. Relatives said that a wheelbarrow normally kept at the house had disappeared shortly after the suspected crime. Investigators considered the possibility that it had been used to transport Nicolly's body. They also focused on a lagoon in the Jardim Amanda area, about 500 meters from Henrique's home. On July 18th, 4 days after Nicolly was last known to be alive according to the principal timeline used in the source text, members of the Hortolandia Municipal Guard searched the area with a dog handler and a tracking dog reportedly named Thor. The dog was given Nicolly's clothing to pick up her scent. After hours of searching, it alerted near the edge of the water. A body was found wrapped in 2 blankets or sheets and blue plastic material. Heavy stones had been placed with the wrapping, apparently to weigh it down and keep it submerged. The initial examination revealed extreme violence, including multiple stab wounds, deep cuts, severe injuries to the face and body, and partial dismemberment. Investigators concluded that the mutilation had been deliberate and intended both to conceal the crime and to make identification more difficult. An inscription was also found on Nicolly's back. It consisted of the initials PCC, referring to the Primeiro Comando da Capital, a major Brazilian criminal organization. This initially created confusion about a possible motive, but law enforcement quickly rejected any genuine link to organized crime. Investigators found no credible evidence that Nicolly had any connection to the criminal underworld. They concluded that the initials had probably been written in an effort to mislead police and create a false trail. The victim's identity was confirmed through several factors. Relatives recognized a black cord or choker that Nicolly regularly wore, and her physical characteristics were consistent with the missing teenager. Family members, including her mother and father, were called to the scene. Their grief was witnessed by journalists and members of the search teams. Investigators said that even experienced officers were deeply shaken by the brutality. Evidence collected at Henrique's home included suspected human blood, dirt marks, household materials resembling those used to wrap the body, and indications that a bed or bedding had been burned in the backyard. The missing wheelbarrow also became part of the police theory. Investigators initially reconstructed the crime as follows. Nicolly Fernanda Pogere was killed inside or in connection with the house, but first was partially dismembered, wrapped in materials taken from the property, placed on a wheelbarrow, and moved to the lagoon. The extreme violence, the concealment of the body, and the attempt to imitate a criminal faction execution supported the theory that the crime involved planning rather than a spontaneous confrontation. After the body was found, investigators concentrated on reconstructing the exact sequence of events. Henrique was already being sought. During further searches, police examined an electric saw found at the property as a possible tool, although the precise role of that object required forensic confirmation. Clothing with brownish stains, believed to be blood, was also reportedly recovered. These discoveries strengthened the connection between the house and the crime. At this stage, Evelyn became a central figure in the investigation. Until then, she had not been treated publicly as a confirmed participant. New witness statements, telephone data, and the analysis of digital communications changed the direction of the case. Another important discovery concerned a message sent from Nicolly's phone on July 15th, after the time when investigators believed she had already been killed. At first glance, the message could have created the impression that Nicolly was still alive. Investigators later concluded that she had not written it. It had been typed and sent from her device after the suspected time of death. Police therefore believed that one of the people involved had attempted to imitate Nicolly's activity in a group chat, mislead her friends and family, and delay the search. This became an important part of the reconstruction. The use of the victim's phone suggested deliberate disinformation and an effort to conceal the crime. Evidence increasingly pointed not only toward Henrique, but also toward Evelyn. Both teenagers stopped communicating with their families. Their location was unknown, and their explanations were contradictory. Their disappearance and silence were interpreted by investigators as signs that they were trying to avoid apprehension. With each passing day, the case increasingly appeared to involve a planned act committed by more than one minor. After Nicolly was officially reported missing and her body was found, police focused on locating the two suspects. Although the teenagers reportedly tried to create the impression that they had fled because of outside threats, officers continued searching locally and in neighboring states. They were apprehended on July 20th, 2025, 2 days after Nicolly's body was found and 6 days after the date on which she was last seen in the timeline used by several reports. Police from Sao Paulo and Paraná located Henrique and Evelyn in Cornélio Procópio, Paraná. They were staying at a house belonging to the grandmother of the teenagers. Investigators said that the relative had sheltered them without informing the authorities. The arrest occurred without resistance. Both teenagers were taken into custody and questioned. Police later stated that they admitted involvement. Henrique reportedly confirmed that Nicolly had been lured to the house under the pretense of a meeting, and that Evelyn was present during the events. Henrique also allegedly stated that he and Evelyn had discussed the situation beforehand. Investigators therefore believed that the actions had been coordinated. The teenagers later claimed that Nicolly had become violent after seeing them together, and that they acted in self-defense. Police said their accounts were inconsistent and continued treating the case as an intentional act comparable to feminicide under Brazilian law. The case moved into the juvenile justice process. Authorities considered the aggravating circumstances, including the extreme violence, the partial dismemberment, the concealment of evidence, the false PCC inscription, and the possible participation of more than one person. Because both suspects were minors, however, the legal consequences were governed by Brazil's child and adolescent statute rather than the adult criminal code. Investigators and Nicolly's family demanded the most severe measure permitted by law. On July 20th, 2025, Nicolly Fernanda Pogere was buried in her home city of Mococa. The funeral was marked by intense grief. Relatives, neighbors, friends, and strangers gathered to say goodbye to a girl whose life had ended with shocking cruelty. Her mother, Priscila Magrin, was in profound shock and made no extended public statement on the day of the burial. Later, she made clear that she was seeking justice, not sympathy. Under Brazilian law, people under 18 are not held criminally responsible in the same manner as adults. Instead, they are subject to socio-educational measures under the Child and Adolescent Statute. The most restrictive measure can involve placement in a secure juvenile institution for up to 3 years, with periodic judicial reviews, generally at intervals no longer than 6 months, and mandatory release no later than the age of 21. After their apprehension, the two teenagers were placed in an appropriate juvenile facility while awaiting further decisions. An initial period of provisional confinement of up to 45 days was authorized. Depending on the outcome of the juvenile proceedings, the measure could later be extended, but not beyond the statutory maximum. The prospect that such a brutal crime could lead to no more than 3 years in a juvenile institution caused widespread public outrage. Social media users, journalists, activists, and public officials openly questioned whether the available legal response was proportionate to the seriousness of the acts. The case became an example of the conflict between the protective principles of juvenile law and the devastating consequences of extreme violence. Critics argued that in cases of exceptional brutality, the limits of the juvenile system could be perceived as indifference toward victims. Nicolly Fernanda Pogere's name became associated with public campaigns demanding accountability and legal reform. Her family and supporters promoted the proposed Lei Nicolly Pogere, seeking stricter responses to exceptionally violent offenses by minors and stronger action against online communities that encourage hatred and violence. The media continued to report on the case, and it was discussed in public forums and legislative campaigns. Importantly, the investigation did not remain completely closed. In late April and early May of 2026, the civil police opened a new inquiry after audio recordings presented by Nicolly's family raised the possibility that an adult third party may have participated in the dismemberment or concealment of the body. Those new allegations were being examined and had not yet been proven. Therefore, while the two teenagers admitted involvements and remained subject to juvenile proceedings, not every aspect of the crime could be treated as finally resolved. Public memory and pressure for a fuller investigation continue to shape the moral judgment surrounding the case. Thank you for watching, and take care.